Usually when we look at a marble statue of a great historical figure, there is there's this expectation of permanence.
Right, like solid, unshakable perfection.
Exactly. You look at the chiseled jaw, the confident pose, and it is just so easy to think, oh, that is a hero.
Yeah.
That is a monument.
Yeah, it presents a very binary view of history. I mean, the statue is solid, it is triumphant, and it certainly does not bleed.
We definitely like our heroes to be invincible, but then, you consider how that statue was actually made in the first place.
Right, the actual process of it.
Yeah, you have to imagine the raw stone being hacked away, the relentless chiseling, the parts of the rock that had to be completely, like, obliterated and ground into dust just to create that perfect, unyielding shape.
It is a violent process.
It really is. And suddenly that heroic monument looks less like a triumph and a lot more like a casualty. So welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are looking at an incredible stack of sources detailing, honestly, the ultimate piece of ancient political PR.
The Aeneid.
Exactly. Our mission today is to track how a living, breathing human refugee is basically systematically hacked away until he is nothing but a stone-cold monument. We are exploring the legendary adventures of Aeneas, a Trojan hero who survived the burning of Troy.
But to really understand what we are looking at here, we have to establish the psychological state of the audience this was written for, because this is not just some campfire myth.
Right, there's a very specific context.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The poet Virgil wrote the Aeneid during the reign of Augustus, right after the absolute chaos of Julius Caesar's assassination.
Just a completely unstable time.
Exactly. Imagine living through a period where the Roman world was, utterly bankrupt and deeply traumatized by decades of furious civil wars. I mean, you wouldn't know who was going to be in charge from one month to the next.
You would be desperate for stability, just any kind of order.
Desperate enough to trade almost anything for it. So when Augustus finally took control with an iron grip, he brought about the Pax Augusta, which was nearly a half-century of peace.
Wow, 50 years.
Yeah, and Virgil and his generation were just fired with enthusiasm for this new order. Rome needed a massive unifying national story. They needed a founder for a race that was supposedly destined to hold the entire world beneath its rule.
So Virgil is essentially drafting the foundational mythology for a new empire.
Exactly.
And that patriotic purpose is really the engine driving everything we're going to talk about today.
Okay.
We're going to watch a massive psychological shift. We will track Aeneas transforming from this deeply human, grieving survivor in the first half of the story into, well, an unfeeling, invincible force of nature by the end.
It is quite the character arc.
It is. And the story kicks off with this incredibly poignant escape. Troy is falling to the Greeks. The city is burning. And Aeneas, who the sources point out, is actually the son of the goddess Venus and a top-tier Trojan commander. He manages to get out.
Yeah, and the image Virgil paints here is just heartbreaking.
It really is.
Yeah.
Aeneas is physically carrying his elderly father, Anchises, on his back and leading his little son by the hand through the smoke.
They manage to sail away with this ragtag group of survivors, but they have no clear idea where they are even going.
Right, totally lost.
Completely unmoored. They eventually receive a prophecy in a dream telling them to head to a country far to the west, which they called Hesperia, what we know today as Italy.
Okay, so they have a destination.
They do, but the journey across the Mediterranean is an absolute nightmare. They are driven away from islands by harpies, those terrifying half-bird, half-woman creatures.
Oh, great.
And they get maritime advice from a Trojan prophet who warns them that the east coast of Italy is crawling with hostile Greeks. He also tells them to absolutely avoid sailing between Sicily and Italy because that narrow strait is guarded by Scylla and Charybdis.
Deadly sea monsters.
Exactly.
So they are told to take the long way around the southern tip of Sicily.
Yeah.
But apparently that prophet had a major blind spot because he completely forgot to mention that southern Sicily was currently overrun by giant man-eating cyclops.
It's a pretty big detail to leave out.
Yeah. So the Trojan refugees land there at night, totally oblivious. And I saw this next scene in the sources, and it felt like something out of a modern horror movie.
Oh, the rescued sailor.
Yes. At dawn, this starving, ragged man bursts out of the woods. He is pale as a ghost, wearing clothes held together by thorns. He literally throws himself on his knees before Aeneas, and it turns out he is a Greek.
Right.
He is one of Ulysses' sailors who was accidentally left behind in the cave of the blind giant Polyphemus.
And he has been hiding in the woods for months, just terrified of the 100 other Cyclops roaming the island. He begs the Trojans to cut their cables and flee immediately.
And they listen to him, right?
They do.
Sure.
And just as they are frantically pushing their ships into the surf, Polyphemus himself wades into the sea. He is washing his bloody, empty eye socket.
Ugh, horrifying.
Yeah, he hears the splashing oars and rushes toward the sound, but the Trojans manage to row just out of his towering reach.
Okay, let's unpack this. Looking at this crew, they're essentially a group of modern-day disaster survivors just trying to catch a single break.
That is exactly what they are.
They are completely at the mercy of things infinitely larger than themselves, so just stumbling in the dark from one monster to another. So, I mean, if Aeneas is supposed to be this great man of destiny, why is Virgil portraying him as so clueless and vulnerable here?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, that vulnerability is the mechanism Virgil uses to ground the story. Aeneas has to start out as deeply relatably human.
Makes sense.
But the real issue here isn't bad weather or poor navigation. It is divine hatred. Aeneas is being actively hunted by Juno, the queen of the gods.
Right.
Juno hates all Trojans because of the judgment of Paris, which was essentially this ancient mythological beauty contest where a Trojan prince insulted Juno by giving the prize to Venus instead of her.
And she holds a cosmic grudge.
A massive one. But her hatred for Aeneas is even more specific than that. The fates have decreed that men of Trojan blood will eventually found Rome.
Aye.
And Rome is fated to conquer Carthage, a city in North Africa that just happens to be Juno's absolute favorite place on Earth.
Oh, wow. So Juno's logic is, like, drown this Trojan refugee now before his great-great-grandchildren can burn my favorite city to the ground.
Exactly, and she takes direct action to make that happen. Juno goes behind the scenes to Aeolus, the king of the winds, and bribes him with her loveliest nymph.
Wow, okay.
She demands a storm to sink the Trojan fleet. Aeolus unleashes a hurricane so violent that the gulfs between the waves actually reveal the floor of the ocean.
That is wild.
The fleet is only saved because Neptune, the god of the sea, gets territorial about Juno interfering in his waters and basically shuts the storm down.
But that divine intervention has a massive side effect, right?
Yeah.
It blows Aeneas's fleet totally off course, sending them straight to the absolute worst possible place for a Trojan to land North Africa.
Right into Juno's Carthage.
Exactly. And Carthage is ruled by Queen Dido, a beautiful widow who fled to Africa after her own brother murdered her husband. She is a refugee who built an empire.
A very powerful parallel to Aeneas.
Yeah, and this triggers a divine chess match that completely obliterates any illusion of free will in this story.
Juno sees a golden opportunity here. If she can get Aeneas and Dido to fall in love, Aeneas will settle comfortably in Carthage. He will never make it to Italy, Rome will never be founded, and Carthage is saved.
But Venus, Aeneas' mother, sees the trap. She wants Aeneas to have a safe harbor temporarily, but she knows his ultimate destiny is Italy.
Right.
So to ensure Dido treats him well, Venus sends her son Cupid to literally set Dido's heart on fire for Aeneas the second she lays eyes on him. Dido does not stand a chance.
She really doesn't. And before Aeneas even meets the queen, he sneaks into Carthage, hidden in a magical mist. He stands before a massive, beautiful temple, and he looks up at the intricate carvings on the walls.
This detail struck me so hard. He looks at the carvings, and they depict the battles of the Trojan War. He sees his dead friends. He sees his enemies. He sees the old King Priam.
Yeah.
And Aeneas just breaks down weeping. He turns to his friend and says, "Here, too, there are tears for things, and hearts are touched by the fate of all that is mortal."
It is such a beautiful line.
It really is. It is this profound moment of universal empathy. He realizes that suffering is the shared language of humanity.
It is the emotional high water mark of Aeneas's humanity. He truly feels the weight of the world. But that empathy is precisely what the narrative is about, to systematically strip away from him.
Oh, absolutely.
Dido, hopelessly manipulated by Cupid, welcomes the Trojans. She throws lavish banquets, gives Aeneas equal honors in her court, and offers him a permanent home.
And Aeneas gets incredibly comfortable. The sources describe him strolling around Carthage supervising building projects, dressed in a purple cloak interwoven with gold thread that Dido made for him.
Wearing a sword studded with jasper.
Yeah, he is basically playing king in a kingdom that is not his.
And Jupiter, the king of the gods, watches this and decides enough is enough. He dispatches his messenger, Mercury, with a stinging rebuke.
He just shows up.
Mercury appears out of nowhere and aggressively asks Aeneas how long he plans to waste his life in idle luxury. He commands Aeneas to leave immediately and seek the kingdom that is owed to his descendants.
which terrifies Aeneas.
Yes, Aeneas is terrified by the divine threat, and he secretly orders his captains to prep the fleet.
Here is where it gets really interesting, because if you are listening to this today, Aeneas' reaction to this breakup is completely baffling.
Oh, it is cold.
Dido figures out he is packing up, and she confronts him, heartbroken. She reminds him that she took him in when he was a starving shipwreck survivor.
Yeah.
And Aeneas just stands there, totally impassive.
Like a statue.
Yeah. He essentially tells her, well, I never officially married you. I'm free to leave, and Jupiter's making me go. So please stop complaining. It is just stressing us both out.
Brutal.
Isn't the gods made me do it the ultimate toxic breakup excuse? He leaves her in the middle of the night.
To a modern listener, it absolutely sounds like the ultimate toxic excuse. But put yourself in the shoes of a Roman citizen in 20 BC.
Okay.
To Virgil's audience, Aeneas is demonstrating the highest Roman virtual duty. He's being stripped of his personal desires, his comfort, and his capacity for love, all for the sake of the empire. The state supersedes personal happiness. Period.
The cost of that duty is immediate and brutal, though. Because as Aeneas sails away in the dark, he looks back toward the walls of Carthage and sees the glow of a massive fire.
He doesn't know what it is.
But we do. When Dido realized he was truly gone, she built a massive funeral pyre and fell on the very sword she had given him. He is literally navigating his ship by the light of her burning body.
It is a profound psychological toll. And to truly lock in this new, hardened mindset, Aeneas has to undergo the ultimate initiation.
The descent into the underworld.
Yes. He must descend into the lower world, into Hades itself, to receive a vision of the future from the ghost of his father, Anchises.
So to know what to do next, he sails to the west coast of Italy to find the Sibyl of Cumae, a powerful prophetess. And the entry requirements for the underworld sound absolutely terrifying.
Very difficult to get into.
He has to find a single golden bough hidden in a pitch-black forest, which he only manages because Venus sends 2 doves to guide him. And then the Sibyl performs this dark ritual.
She slaughters 4 coal-black bullocks to Hecate, the dread goddess of the night. The earth literally quakes beneath their feet. Dogs howl out of the shadows, and the ground opens up to swallow them into the cavern.
The sources map out this descent, and frankly, it sounds like walking through a psychological nightmare. What exactly does he have to face down there?
Virgil personifies human suffering. Aeneas and the Sibyl walk down a shadowy road flanked by terrifying figures: pale disease, hunger that drives men to crime, death-dealing war, and mad discord with snaky, blood-stained hair.
Wow.
They push past all of this until they reach the river junction of the underworld, where shivering souls beg the ferryman Charon for a ride across the water.
And Charon doesn't want to take Aeneas, right?
Right. Charon initially refuses Aeneas because he is a living, breathing man, but the sight of that golden bough forces him to yield. They even have to throw a drugged cake to Cerberus, the 3-headed guard dog, just to get by.
But the emotional gut punch of this descent happens in the fields of mourning.
Yes, the area for heartbroken lovers.
Exactly. This is the area of the underworld reserved for lovers who were driven to suicide. And Aeneas sees Dido wandering in a grove of myrtle trees. He breaks down. He weeps, swearing to her ghost that he left Carthage against his will, that the gods forced his hand.
And Dido's reaction tells us everything we need to know about where Aeneas stands now.
She gives him the ultimate cold shoulder.
Yes. She doesn't look at him. She doesn't speak a single word. The text explicitly says she stood there like a piece of marble. She is totally unmoved by his tears.
His empathy does not work anymore. His tears for things are totally useless. So he leaves her in the dark and moves on to the Elysian fields, this softly lit paradise where heroes dwell.
And here he finds his father, Anchises.
Standing near the river Lethe, right? The river of forgetfulness.
Anchises is watching a massive crowd of souls who are waiting to drink from the river, wipe their memories, and be reborn into the world above.
It is essentially a literal trailer park for the Roman Empire.
That is a great way to put it.
Anchises is basically showing Aeneas a movie trailer of all the famous Romans who will ever exist. Romulus, the Caesars, Augustus himself. They're all waiting in the wings for their cue to enter history.
Anchises is giving him the ultimate motivational speech. He is basically saying, this is what you sacrificed Dido for. Look at the masters of the world you are going to create.
And armed with that massive imperial vision, Aeneas returns to the surface. He's a changed man. He finally makes it to Latium in central Italy. And initially, things actually look promising.
Surprisingly so.
The local ruler, old King Latinus, have been warned by a spirit to marry his daughter Lavinia to a foreign stranger. That union is prophesied to birth a world-ruling race. So, Latinus welcomes the Trojans with open arms.
You would think the hardest part is over, but Juno is still watching.
Of course she is.
She knows she cannot stop fate, but she decides that if Rome is going to be founded, she is going to make the process as incredibly bloody as possible.
So what does she do?
She bypasses the civilized gods and summons a fury named Alecto straight from the depths of Hades. Alecto is pure, venomous chaos. She flies to Latium and infects the king's wife, Queen Amata, and a local prince named Turnus, who wanted to marry Lavinia himself, with an absolute battle frenzy.
Wait, I have to ask about the actual spark for this war, because the Trojan War started over Helen, famously the most beautiful woman in the world, and the Roman War starts over a pet deer.
Yeah, it does.
Why such a seemingly trivial spark? How does that even happen?
What is fascinating here is how it highlights the tragedy of how conflicts actually ignite on the ground. Alecto guides Aeneas' young son, Ascanius, who was out hunting, to shoot a stag, but it is not a wild animal.
It is a pet.
It is a deeply beloved, tame pet stag belonging to a local Latin farmer. The farmer's daughter combed its coat, she wreathed its horns with flowers. It was practically a member of the community.
Oh, man.
Ascanius shoots it, the bleeding deer runs back to its home to die, and the local farmers are so devastated and enraged that they grab their axes and pitchforks.
It is a brilliant mechanism by Virgil. It shows that it rarely takes a grand geopolitical crisis to start a bloodbath. It just takes a highly localized emotional trigger, manipulated by those who want chaos.
Exactly.
The farmers don't care about destiny or empires. They care about their beloved animal.
And Juno capitalizes on that localized grief. When King Latinus locks himself in his palace and refuses to officially declare war, Juno herself sweeps down from the sky and physically bursts open the gates of the Temple of Janus.
Which is the ultimate Roman symbol for a state of war.
Precisely.
So outnumbered and facing a massive uprising, Aeneas seeks allies. He gets advice in a dream to travel upstream to a poor rustic settlement ruled by King Evander.
And Evander welcomes him.
Yeah, he takes him on a walking tour of his little town, and I love the detail that he points out a hill covered in rough brambles and a muddy meadow full of lowing cows.
To Aeneas, it is just a poor farming village.
But to Virgil's Roman audience, they recognize this exact spot as the future golden capital and the bustling Roman forum.
It is a powerful propaganda tool, connecting the humble, rustic roots of Italy to the glittering imperial present of Augustus. Evander pledges his own young son, Pallas, to fight alongside Aeneas.
And he advises Aeneas to ally with the Etruscan army, right?
Yes. The Etruscans are eager to fight because they are rebelling against their former king, Mezentius, who has allied himself with the Latins, and Mezentius is a true monster.
The psychological horror of Mezentius is really vivid in the sources. He didn't just execute people. He delighted in a horrific method of torture.
It is awful.
He would tie living prisoners face to face and hand to hand with rotting corpses, leaving the living to die a slow, agonizing death from the putrefaction of the dead.
He represents the chaotic cruelty that Aeneas is supposedly destined to wipe out. But while Aeneas is away securing this Etruscan alliance, the Trojan camp is besieged. And we get this deeply human, tragic side story about two best friends.
Nisus and Euryalus. Nisus is an older, experienced soldier, and Euryalus is a young, eager stripling. They volunteer to sneak through the sleeping enemy camp at night to get a message out to Aeneas.
And the sources say they carve a highway of dead men through the camp, slaughtering dozens of sleeping soldiers.
But then Euryalus makes a fatal mistake.
Hmm?
What exactly goes wrong here?
He prioritizes personal glory over the collective mission. In the dark, Euryalus spots a beautifully shining enemy helmet. He takes it as loot and puts it on his own head.
Oh no.
As daylight breaks, a troop of enemy cavalry spots the gleam of that shiny helmet through the trees. They surround the woods. The two friends are separated in the brush, and young Euryalus is captured.
Nisus actually manages to escape the woods. But when he realizes his friend isn't behind him, he goes back, alone, against an entire company of cavalry.
A suicide mission.
Completely. He sees the enemy leader raise a sword to execute Euryalus. Nisus breaks from cover and charges in, screaming, "Kill me! Media is all mine! He only followed me!"
But he is too late.
The sword goes straight into Euryalus' chest. Nisus throws himself at the man who did it, kills him, and then is pierced by dozens of darts, falling dead beside his best friend.
It is arguably the most heartbreaking moment in the entire epic. But look at the mechanism Virgil is employing here. He is showing us that the old heroic ideal sneaking around for personal loot and individual glory gets you killed.
Yeah.
The new Roman ideal requires absolute subordination to the state mission. The story of Nisus and Euryalus is the last gasp of pure, relatable human emotion in the poem. Because what follows is a stark contrast.
The humanity completely drains out of the narrative. Aeneas returns with the Etruscan army, and from here on out, the story essentially becomes a highlight reel of slaughter.
Total carnage.
We're talking rivers of blood drenching the earth, the brazen throats of trumpets blaring constantly. Countless heroes die on both sides. Evander's young son, Pallas, is killed. The warrior maiden Camilla is killed. The cruel Mezentius is killed.
And in the middle of this bloodbath, we witness the final thematic transformation of Aeneas, the man who tenderly carried his father out of Troy, the man who cried at the temple carvings in Carthage. Well, that man is gone.
He really is.
Virgil's language changes completely. He stops describing Aeneas as a hero and starts describing him as a fearful prodigy.
The metaphors become entirely monstrous. The text says Aeneas is vast as Mount Athos. He fights like the mythological monster Aegeon, who had 100 arms and 100 hands, flashing fire through 50 mouths and swinging 50 sharp swords all at once.
He is no longer a human being.
No, he is an elemental force of destruction. And when Aeneas finally faces the local prince, Turnus, for the final duel to decide the war, there is absolutely zero suspense. You don't fear for Aeneas.
Not at all.
The text explicitly says that for Turnus to fight Aeneas is like fighting a literal earthquake. Aeneas effortlessly kills him, claims the Princess Lavinia, and founds the Roman race.
Virgil summarizes this entire ethos right at the end of the poem. He writes that the destiny of the Roman race was to leave things like fine art and delicate science to other nations.
That wasn't their purpose.
No, Rome's unique, terrifying purpose was, to quote the source directly, to impose the rule of submissive non-resistance, to spare the humbled and to crush the proud. Aeneas became that crushing force. He became the chisel that carved the marble.
So what does this all mean? It is an incredibly sobering realization. The journey of Aeneas is a masterful piece of political propaganda.
It absolutely is.
It takes a grieving refugee, systematically strips away his personal desires, his loves, and his human empathy, and turns him into a human earthquake, just to justify an empire's existence.
A perfect monument.
Exactly. So, if you are listening to this today, the next time you see a slick political narrative or a hero's journey being heavily promoted by a nation or even a massive corporation, ask yourself, what parts of the hero's actual humanity had to be erased or ignored to make that symbol work?
A very relevant question.
We are told that Aeneas reached his destiny. He founded a glorious race. But if you have to descend into the underworld, abandon the person who saved you, and mutate into a 100-armed monster just to achieve your so-called destiny, did you actually win? Or did you just let them chisel away everything that made you human?